problems I had with the car that led me to start looking into this. Uh, it was sort of started out like be driving it and start running real rough, and it wouldn't like go over like 30 miles an hour. Like it would just like it had no power at all. Like it would rev up, but there'd be no power to the car. What eventually I think happened to it was one of these solenoid valves here got stuck open. So after the car would go through it usually runs for about 90 seconds or so. When it first warms up, and that's its cycle, it runs about, maybe 90 seconds and then it turns off. And you'll know if you have air injection because when you start your car it'll sort of sound like a vacuum cleaner running for like 90 seconds or so. But what happened with this was this valve actually got stuck in the open position. So after it would run, it would shut off, the valve, and this would shut off, but this valve was still stuck open. So what was happening was the exhaust was blowing out into the blower, which eventually I think clogged up the blower. And when you would start to drive at a faster speed, what happened was this hose blew off, and you could actually hear the exhaust coming out of this when the car was sitting running. So I knew that one of these valves was stuck open because they're supposed to close after that 90 seconds. So I listened to the blower motor. It's sort of underneath the front of the engine, right in front of the driver's tire. It's underneath, that's where the blower is. And I listened to it when it was running, and you could hear the exhaust. That's one sign that one of these valves is stuck open. And what it eventually did was, I think, got this motor so clogged up that it actually blew the fuse in the fuse box for the motor. So right now I've taken this out, this blower motor and the filter connection for it, and have it out of the car. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to start working on to try to repair, because I think it may be able to repair it and just put a new fuse in and see if it works again. But definitely going to have to replace these two valves because this one's stuck open, and this one's probably not far behind if this one's messed up, because they're probably original. But one way you can check these two is to take them off and try to blow through them. If you can blow through them, they're no good. If you leave them on the car and just disconnect these hoses, start the car and wait till it goes through its cycle, and then feel if there's any exhaust coming out of them. If there's no exhaust coming out of them, that means that they've closed the way they should, and they're probably still good. And and you have to check to make sure that in that first 90 seconds you got enough vacuum coming from these hoses to these to open them up, is another thing. Which you could check the same thing, when you first start the car. If you have these off, you can feel with your hand over the valve. When you first start it, you should feel exhaust coming out for the first 90 seconds or so out of those valves. And then after the system's done, they should close and you should feel no exhaust coming out of them on this side. That's a way you could check them to see if they're working right. And another way you could try to do it just by disconnecting this and just listen to it in the hose too, to see if you're hearing exhaust for the first 90 seconds or so, and then no exhaust sound coming through them. Or you could even put a balloon over the end of it, and it should start filling up for the first 90 seconds. But after that amount of time, that balloon shouldn't get any air blowing it up. It should just be sitting there. But I'll show you how things are going as I go. And what I will do is the next part will be showing you the motor and taking it apart. Another thing, when I actually took this blower motor out, it's extremely hard to get to where the bolts are on the top of it, because it sits under the car and there's 3 bolts, but you can't get to them. So what I did was unhook the hoses and I sort of tilted it and I cut them off with a knife, the rubber grommets that are attached to it. That was the only way I could get it out without taking a ton of stuff off to try to get to it. I don't even know if you really could that way by taking stuff off the top, but I figure these hoses, when I put them back on, I'm going to put them on with hose clamps, and these hoses are heavy enough that they'll just hold that pretty much in place, or you could wrap it up a little, you know, to keep it in place. But yeah, I'll give you an update when I start tearing this apart to start working on the motor, and when I replace the valves, I'll make a video of that too to show what that looks like and everything.